Hello and welcome to Creature Club, a show where myself and Dan and Mikey over here say hello, boys.
Woo! Hey.
Hello, boys.
We usually introduce ourselves, but hey, thanks, Tim.
Yeah,
Leaves me from doing any work.
gotta change it up a little bit. But this is Creature Club, where we walk through the monster manual from Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, and we talk about the creatures and monsters therein. We will break them down in a worldly context and then in the context of D&D. Then we will go through their stat block and then we will see how we might use them in encounters or campaign settings. In that right, boys?
Yeah, that's right. That's good.
Yeah, that was good.
Thanks.
That was good, Tim. Well done. Now, this time for real.
All right. For real.
No, please don't.
More energy. Hi, everybody.
Oh God, stop! Turn it down.
Yeah, I said to Tim at the start of this, like, a bit of energy, Tim. And then he's like, hey!
That's how I do, boys. That's how I do.
It is how you do.
Yeah, I'm peaking on this, so we'll bring it down a bit.
Yeah.
Bring it down.
Yeah, we'll
Bring
take it
it
down. It's
Cool.
it's a dark November night. We can take it easy.
Oh yeah, take it easy. Take it now a little less life. Hey, Daniel.
Hey,
What episode is this?
6.
Cool.
It's
what are we
wait,
doing?
no shit. I mean, it's the episode on the Ankheg. Damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize. This is episode Ankheg, which is number 6 because we did a 2-parter on the Angels. Sorry about that. So this is our penultimate A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only one
Definitely.
left after this, and you'll have to tune in next week for the last one. We won't reveal it until then.
We're going through the monster manual alphabetically. They could look at the first, the 3rd page of the book, and they'd know.
No reading ahead, students.
No, I see you out there turning the page, listener. Don't do that. Don't turn that page.
Don't
look
you
at the
do
next
it.
page.
Don't they can do what they want. Look,
Guys, we're being sidetracked.
The podcast is not about them not turning the page. This podcast is all about the Ankheg.
Indeed.
Yeah, this episode.
An Ankheg it's a gigantic arthropod is the correct term, which is the same family as spiders and scorpions and praying mantises. It's a giant. It's effectively a gigantic insect. It's interesting. Its looks have changed a lot over the years. So before we get started, I actually wanted to say something interesting, which is just that the Ankheg is a great example of how, my preconceived notions about the game are so frequently wrong.
No.
So I looked at the Ankheg and I was like, I've never heard of this thing. Like, it's got this kind of weird name, and the art for the 5th edition book, which obviously we're all looking at, to me reminds me a lot of the Tyranids, the alien race from Warhammer 40k.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also the Zerg. Sorry, I forgot their name for a second. The Zerg from StarCraft and StarCraft 2, obviously, they're very visually similar. I can't remember who stole from who. I think Blizzard stole the Zerg from the Tyranid, but I could be wrong. But anyway, they have very, very similar aesthetics. And this Ankheg, the one in the 5th edition manual, kind of looks like that. It's got the sort of a crown on its head. It's got kind of mandibles. It's got these big, digging claws.
Yeah, the kind of dramatically colorful chitinous hide as well. Is
yeah. It's kind of pinky
very
and
reminiscent.
yeah. But I was wrong in a lot of ways. So the Ankheg is from it's actually from it's weird. It's from Dragon Magazine number 5.
Okay, pretty early one.
So the first one of the first issues.
Wow.
The funny thing about it is that Dragon Magazine number 5 is so early that it actually, at least I think, I could have my history wrong, but as far as I can tell, it actually predates the Monster Manual. So Dragon Magazine number 5 came out back when Dungeons and Dragons was just Dungeons and Dragons, before it was even advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So the Ankheg was designed by an artist called Errol Otis, and it was almost like his job application for joining TSR, the guys who produced D&D.
Cool.
So it was sent in as kind of a I don't know if it was meant as a job application, but he did eventually get hired by them, and they put it in Dragon Magazine, which is cool. And it's interesting because when you look at it in Dragon Magazine number 5, which you can find for free online, they're archived, don't worry. But it's kind of interesting because the page that describes the Ankheg is a single page, and it's of that single page, most of it is a piece of artwork.
Cool.
Just a piece of artwork of the Ankheg. It's like a family of them emerging from underground. It's actually it's kind of like old school D&D. It's more like it's not like dramatic like this Ankheg like coming at you. It's kind of almost like a nature drawing, like, which is how a lot of old D&D drawings work.
Kind of journalistic kind
yeah,
of thing.
Almost as if exactly,
research.
almost as if you were like researching these creatures and you're like, well, here's a group of them coming out of the ground. This is what they look like. You're not trying to kill them. You're just documenting them because that's your job.
That's pretty cool.
It is cool. And then like only the last like fraction of the page is actually the stats of the monster. And it's very, very short. It's just like, oh, this is how it works. And it's actually kind of nice. It's nice to look at this and be like, I can tell that an artist like made this, because they weren't so concerned with like, how does it work? They were like, it works like this. It doesn't matter. Look how cool it is. Like, it's this big insect.
Yeah, it's almost showing that you can put it into your game to have more of just like a creature in the background instead of a thing to fight.
Yeah. Yeah, very true.
Like
yeah.
almost like an animal that just happens to be around.
Yeah, exactly.
It's for just filling up the world. Because I think...
Yeah, almost like that.
I think I certainly fell into the trap of not kind of like explaining the world around me as much. Like, I think I got off to a good start with it in my campaign with the axe beaks and some of the other creatures and stuff. But I think as we progressed, I kind of gradually stopped describing all the animals and creatures around. And I think this is a nice little one to throw into.
Yeah, it's a bit tough to do that. It's tough to
paint the world.
explain all that stuff. Because when it comes to D&D, when you want creatures and stuff, you just have to fight them. But sidetracking a little bit.
Yeah,
but
sorry, we did get a little bit sorry, but anyway, that was just something I wanted to say. So the Ankheg's a big arthropod. It started off life as basically a gigantic centipede, the initial art, and if you look at the if you Google Ankheg and you look at the Wikipedia page, the artwork it has there is, I think, from the first monster manual. It's like this black and white line drawing, like a lot of the stuff back then.
I see it now.
And it's actually kind of cute, honestly. Like,
he is. He's adorable.
it's like you could legitimately see a player having it as a pet. So it's a fairly like straightforward creature. It's actually basically remained unchanged throughout all the editions. It's always been a giant insect. It's always been an arthropod, either more centipede-like. This one is almost more like a tick from the kind of full body art that it has in the background.
Yeah,
which is interesting. I think I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it makes sense or not, because I'm not like an ecologist, but it's interesting anyway. Obviously, the design, like the redesign might just be because they wanted different artists' takes on it, and I think it's very reasonable that like if you find that this Ankheg art here is a little bit unusual, you could probably just use them. You could say they're centipedes in your world, which is one of the strengths of D&D. But yeah, they've always lived underground. There's always been an emphasis on how they sort of attack farms to feed on the animals and then bury underground again, and nobody knows what they are.
Primarily ambush predators, kind of
opportunistic.
Exactly.
There's actually a great article in Dragon Magazine. I think it's 177. Yeah, I've got it open here. 177, which is called "The Ecology of the Ankheg," and it's basically it's like a three-page. It's like this 3-page story from the point of view of a wizard, and the wizard is effectively he's in charge of this town. He's acting as a representative for the local lord, and they're reporting to the wizard what's happening, and he figures out that it's the Ankheg, and then describes how the villagers could stop it.
Okay.
So it's actually a pretty nice piece of writing, but what's cool about it in particular is it's called The Ecology of the Ankheg, and that's very accurate because actually, we'll get to that at the end of the podcast, because that's kind of about how you might use it in your campaign. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked and excited.
That's okay.
Shall we hop? Do you have anything else to say, Dan? Sorry.
In terms of its history, no, that's everything.
I was just gonna ask. Shall we go into the what's like in the game, like what they do and stuff?
Yes, absolutely.
Let's jump on in.
Well, pretty much the first thing that pretty much tells you is that it's a burrower. Am I saying burrower?
Burrower. Burrower was correct.
He digs in the ground and he digs up and stuff. He's like lurkers in the earth is one thing on it. what it says there, like the Ankheg uses powerful mandibles to dig winding tunnels deep beneath the ground. So yeah, he just has a bunch of tunnels underground, and he kind of hangs out in there. They're kind of like is there like a term use those kind of insects, like kind of burrowing creatures, burrowing insects and stuff?
That's just about it. The kind of burrowing creatures. I don't know if there is a specific.
If there is a specific term, I don't know it.
Nor
yeah,
I.
But it's similar to giant ants. Certain spiders do it. Certain scorpions do it. Like a lot of different creatures do it. A lot of different insects in particular do it.
But this guy definitely does it, and they hang out mostly underground.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it's saying.
So I mean, yeah. So they're big insects. They live underground. They only really emerge to secure prey, and then they leave again. They're not so interested. Like they don't seem to have any interest in territory above ground. It would purely be like go up. In the, and this is again, I don't want to spoil too much, but in the ecology of the Ankheg thing, it mentions how they snatch like cows or dogs or like basically whatever they can get their hands on.
Mm-hmm.
And then just pull them back underground and like they disappear.
Even like I was reading the 4E manual, and it says that they snatch people as well.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. Yeah, which is like why they're so dangerous.
Don't want these in my game anymore. They're too dangerous, too scary.
They're pretty scary, which can be a good adventure hook, where it takes like a farmer's daughter or something, and then they have to go down there and get her back. It's like a classic kind of monster steals the, or like a farmer's son, whatever. Like
Totally.
not being sexist here.
Well, yeah, it doesn't say that they tend to specifically make a kind of a hive idea, but that's how I would imagine them. It doesn't say that they have like larger groups.
Yeah, it's interesting. So in terms of like how it works, it's different. So in this edition, it doesn't really specify. It mentions obviously that Ankhegs lay eggs, and that you might find them in Ankheg tunnels, which is a great way to set up more Ankheg encounters later on. Like you could actually almost have a whole arc just about like, an Ankheg has been eating people in this village. Turns out it's like a mama Ankheg. It's been laying loads of eggs, and now you got to find its progeny and like stop them before they get to other villages. That would actually be kind of fun, especially because it would be perfect for like a low-level group. Because so like there's not a lot of lore on the Ankheg. They are effectively a creation of Dungeons and Dragons. I did go looking into sort of arthropods in like history and myth and culture. Unsurprisingly, centipedes don't have pride of place. When it comes to arthropods, everyone wants to talk about spiders and scorpions.
Yeah.
The ones that are poisonous or kill people are more exciting than the ones that stick to themselves.
I think they left the Ankheg probably purposefully broad so that you could kind of project whatever type of arthropod kind of traits onto it that you'd like,
Yeah,
like
I think that's a very good point.
as a poisonous thing. You could have them living in just a family, or you could have them having a whole hive of them. I think they left it that broad.
But I've got a lot of exciting things to talk about in campaigns, so I'm gonna say let's go.
I was just gonna say that like from what Tim said there, when I see these guys, I look at the classic xenomorph kind of encounter where like a hive of them and like just a classic bug hunt kind of thing.
Yeah,
this is a bug hunt, man. But that's for part 3.
That's it. Whoa.
Cool. So, shall we jump on into the stat block and
we should.
actions?
It's time for dinner. Meat and potatoes.
Meat and potatoes. I'm hungry, Mama. What's for dinner? Meat and potatoes as always.
Feed me meat and potatoes right now.
I got my meat and potatoes right here.
So the Ankheg is a large monstrosity, which is perfect. It's what I like about it is that like realistically, a giant insect, the idea of an insect the size of a person is giant, but the fact that it's a large creature, like it's even bigger than a person, like it's the size of a horse effectively.
Yeah.
Like it's it's this massive creature. I actually think that's really cool. Because like I think I don't know, I guess I feel like it would be like the safe thing to do would be to make them medium, but the fact that they're large just makes them kind of exciting.
A little bit more threatening, and they are pretty significant with
absolutely
their strength, and they're no pushovers. They're challenge rating 2, which means if you want to like introduce your characters by like sending them against some baby ones and then they have to fight a big one, that's pretty reasonable.
It's a perfect boss fight for level 1, I think. Actually, just by looking at it.
That's a good point.
It's a really good it's a really good challenging boss fight for him. I'd say. It might even be a bit too easy actually, but hey,
Nothing wrong with that.
Yep, nothing wrong with that at all. Like what I think is interesting here, and it's good look at the armor class. Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
It's armor class 14, regular number, sure, and it says 11 while prone next to it. So it's almost giving you a little puzzle encounter in there already, where you have to knock him over and hit his soft underbelly or something for massive damage. Like that's I never actually noticed that before in any other bits where it kind of give you a second armor class.
I haven't noticed that either. But that's pretty cool. It kind of maybe it's because a lot of I'd imagine arthropods can't probably get back up onto their feet once they've been knocked onto their back, because a lot of them are very heavily armored on their backs, like a lot of beetles and stuff like that. So there you go. Effective. Interesting.
Stats. Regular old stats. 1 intelligence. So 1 intelligence. You wouldn't really get much intelligence from a bug, but whatever. That's
you
fine.
wouldn't sit down by the fire and have a chat about philosophy with them. Let's say.
Yeah. Talk about your backstory and all that.
It is worth mentioning just very briefly that even though it describes how they're natural diggers and stuff, they actually only have a burrow speed of 10 feet, so they can only dig at a rate of 10 feet per round.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because I get the impression that the reason they've done that is probably because the implication is that Ankheg dig tunnels over the course of a while, right? They don't speed dig. They they build themselves a home underground, basically. In the description, it even mentions how they use their acid to help them dig tunnels faster. But also I think it's an interesting little piece of it's kind of a subtle piece of encounter design, because it can't get away too quickly. It's only got a burrow speed of 10 feet, which means that it can't out-dig the party. It can't dig faster than they can run. So if they can figure out where it's going, they can beat it there, which is a nice way to reward your party.
And it can't just run away from them normally, because its run speed is just 30 feet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. So it has dark vision of 60 feet and tremor sense of 60 feet, which is, again, working into its kind of sensory abilities underground. And its passive perception is 11. So,
so
pretty good.
Yeah, so you can have him almost chase you down and hear you when you enter his lair. By your vibrations, by walking around and making noise. So maybe you couldn't sneak up on him.
Yeah, unless you're being a rogue and you roll stupidly high.
But
that's what they do.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
No languages. All right, that's fine. Challenge rating 2. That's fine.
Sorry, that surprised me.
Yeah.
No languages.
What languages do you speak?
No habla español? Dang. Nope. All right, well, guys, I'm out of ideas.
I'm out. Please clean
Just
out.
none.
Cool.
Actions. Bite.
It's
a bite.
It's got a bite. It deals a bit of slashing damage, a bit of acid damage, and it gets to grab you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In its big, scary mandibles that early on in this, it says its mandibles could snap a small tree in half. So you don't want to be bit by those. That's some bad stuff.
That's kind of strange, though, because, well, not really strange, but just kind of interesting that Bite is his kind of main move, because Acid Spray, we'll get onto it, but it's a recharge move, so you won't be doing that a lot. But Bite, pretty much every single attack he does, he's going to be grabbing some member of your party, every turn.
Yeah.
But I guess that makes it a bit interesting.
What's cool about the bite is that it grapples you, and then it says that he has advantage on whoever he's grappling.
Yeah.
Oh,
So the idea is kind of that he uses his mandibles to grab one creature and then devours it. And I think that's a really cool dramatic way for a creature to fight. The sense that it's very evocative to have it grab a single member of the party, and it's just going crazy, and the rest of the party are basically trying to pull this thing off him.
It does make for a very powerful imagery. If one of your characters gets bitten and then just kind of shaken around by this enormous chitinous creature, it's oh my god, what's happening to Steve? Sorry, Steve.
It almost reminds me of when we play Monster Hunter, and if it has one of you guys grappled, and then the other two are just they're just hitting them, just get off my mate,
get off my buddy. Well, yeah, that's one of the things, and it does do acid damage as well. So it implies that you're right up in its acid spitting, chitinous, toothy maw.
Yeah,
which is
it
cool.
doesn't do too much damage in the attack, which is good because it's fairly accurate for a low level monster, and obviously the fact that it can grapple you and then get advantage is very powerful. It means it's very consistently, and it's very likely to just keep hitting you. So the fact that it then has a relatively, I mean, you know, still dangerous certainly, but relatively low damage output does mean that it's like, you know, not too bad. Like for the level it's at, it's certainly dangerous, but it's also got very, very few hit points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like realistically, like if you guys had faced one of these things, I think you would have like bludgeoned it to death in a single round.
Yeah, very, very quickly.
Definitely, yeah.
Unless it had gotten really lucky. But anyway, yeah, and then the last action.
Wait. Mikey, you want to take this one?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Acid spray. The Ankheg spits acid in a line that is 30 feet long and 5 feet wide, provided that has no creature grappled. Each creature in the line must make a DC, blah, 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 dexterity saving throw, blah, 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 taking damage, blah, 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 on a failed save, half damage. Yeah, just basically he just spits acid out. It's a recharge move, so it's kind of his special move that he does, and if you want to do it again, you have to, like, roll some dice. But you can't do it all the time. But it's like a special move where he shoots out acid and hits more than one guy. Yeah. So it goes back to the entire acid damage aesthetic the guy goes for.
It's very, very much on theme.
Yeah, I was only going to say it's worth mentioning it has the recharge. It's recharge 6. How recharge powers work very briefly is if they say recharge X, whenever you use them, you're not allowed to use them again until you roll one of those numbers on a D6, which you'll do at the start of each of the monster's rounds.
Yes.
So you can generally tell how often you can obviously replace the die roll with something else, but you can generally tell with how often the designers want you to have an ability based on the recharge. So for example, if a recharge says 4, 5, or 6, then that means that half of the time you'll recharge that power, which is the same as saying you should have it every 2 turns, you know, like statistically speaking. Whereas this is recharge 6, and what that's basically saying is you should probably only have this once per encounter, like twice, either if the monster effectively gets lucky or, you know, the fight goes long.
Yeah. How I would see it being used as maybe a kind of encounter-centric kind of thing. Like, they'll probably grapple something because they think that they can just grab it and eat it and run away, but they'll probably spit all this acid when they're essentially close to death, you know? Like, this is their
defense
Hail
mechanism.
Mary? Is that the term?
Yeah,
Hail
that's
Mary?
correct term.
Yeah, like it's their like, get away from me, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then they'll probably try to run away.
Yeah, like a squid shooting ink and like swimming away.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
One thing I want to point out, I'm looking at the Ankheg on the 4E. Something I find interesting about it is that it has a resist of acid damage.
Yeah.
It resists 5 hit points. I think it says 5 resist 5 acid.
Yeah,
I think
that's what that means, yeah.
If I can remember 4E, if you do damage, he can take off 5 of that if it's acid damage. And I know that doesn't really have the same mechanic in 5E, but he doesn't really have any immunities or resistances to acid on this, which I think could be pretty cool if you added it into him, because he kind of has an acid aesthetic going on, and it would make sense if you did acid damage to him, then he might not take as much, you know. But
it would make perfect sense.
I was also just going to mention that you should, like, if you have a fight with the Ankheg, it'd be definitely worth thinking about the acid spray in relation to. So it mentions briefly how it uses it to help it dig. But it fires it in a 30 feet line, which is 5 feet wide, which is a fairly significant area. It's like you know, the fact that it's not like a sort of, I suppose, a cone or like a kind of more close range, it actually goes fairly far. Like, suggests that it has a fair amount of, like, it can travel quite far when it's used. So maybe like you might, you know, you might do something like, you might specify how the acid, you know, knocks holes in the dirt when you're fighting it in its cave, or even, and this is definitely, we're getting into part 3 now. Sorry, by the way, I've hijacked this car. I'm driving us into part 3, and if you try and stop me, I will plow us into a wall. I've taken over. This is now. Look at me. I'm the captain now. Sorry. So this is just an idea. The acid spray, it obviously describes how much damage it does, blah, blah, blah. But you could definitely say something like it does twice as much damage to objects. And you could have, say, you know, you could have a group of Ankhegs and they're very, very hungry, and the last of the villagers are holed up in a fortress, and the Ankheg starts spitting acid to melt the walls of the fortress.
Ooh, dramatic.
That's cool, Dan. That's very cool, but I'm taking the wheel back.
No, God.
I'm
I'm gonna let you finish.
I'm gonna let you finish, but we got Mickey Potatoes to eat here, okay? No, honestly, yeah, that's cool, but I just wanted to start mentioning, you've talked about it a bit, Dan, you have a little bit on this, but 4E, once again, because there's a lot on 4E, but there's not too much on 5E for these guys.
Yeah.
But 4E have what's called Ankheg broodlings.
Yes.
Ooh.
Which are minions. If you guys remember us talking about minions, they are units that if you hit once, they're dead and they squash, and they're just kind of used for your party members to seem big. But they have these little, they're pretty much their children who can follow you around and like who follow around the big ones, I mean, and are just kind of smaller versions of it. And it would be cool to kind of bring them in as well. But Dan, do you have a bit on that for 5e?
Yeah, I actually do. I wrote up a custom stat block, which I'll attach it to this so you can see it when you're listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
But it's very straightforward. I basically just took the Ankheg, I depowered it, I made it weaker, I made it less well armored, I gave it less health. I definitely think this is an example of you could definitely just make these guys minions and not give them health at all. Just have the minion rule of they have 1 health, but if an attack misses, it never deals any damage. So they are a smaller, weaker Ankheg. The only thing I did is I gave them a special rule, which is the same special rule they have in 4th edition. In 4th edition, they have a rule called Brood Swarm, which is when they're attacking a creature that is grappled by an Ankheg, they get +4 to hit, which is very strong. Obviously, it means they're very likely to hit. So I changed that slightly just to make it a little more fun. I said that the Ankheg Broodling gets +1 d4 to hit and to damage when it's attacking a creature grappled by an Ankheg.
That's kind of cool. I like that.
So the reason I used a d4 is because a d4 is statistically equivalent to +2. So if you don't want to roll more dice, just use a +2. But everyone likes rolling dice. Even the DM likes rolling dice when they have time.
Not me. Yeah. I like rolling digital dice.
But that's still rolling dice.
Yeah, Tim has a little app that he just presses one button and there's dice rolls. And
Dice
it's funny
Ex
seeing you
Machina.
just
That's what it's called.
It's funny seeing you just push a little button behind the DM screen, and it's just the same feeling as rolling those dice.
But yeah, so I prefer giving dice rolls when I can because it's a little more, I guess, in the spirit of D&D, how it works overall with dice rolls kind of deciding everything. But also just because it's I think it's more in line with how 5th edition even likes to be designed. It's kind of inspired by the leadership ability that I think the Knight NPC has, which is way at the end of the book, so we won't get to him for ages, but he has an ability similar enough to that, and that's where the idea came from of using a d4. So it's the same idea, just that the Broodling gets an extra d4 to attack. I did also say damage rolls just because I thought it was more exciting that it can do a bit more damage, because it's normally able to do very little damage because it's a smaller Ankheg. It's got the same thing as the base Ankheg where it does a bit of slashing and a bit of acid, because I thought that would be nice to keep that. So that's kind of but it's interesting because that idea of the Ankheg Broodling being more accurate with when attacking creatures grappled by the Ankheg is cool, because it actually in the 4th edition Monster Manual kind of describes the ecology, because the Ankheg has one other special rule that it doesn't have in 5th edition, which I don't know if it needs because I don't know the rules off the top of my head, but the Ankheg in 4th edition has a special rule that says if it's grappling a creature, it can still move at full speed.
Okay.
Ooh. So the idea is basically that in 4th edition combat, an Ankheg will run up, grab someone, and just pull them away. And as it does that, the broodlings will just feast on this creature.
Yeah.
And then it just drops a pile of bones, basically.
I think in 5e, because it's a large creature, it pretty much can do that. There's lots of maths, lots of stupid stuff in there, but just trust me on this. I think a large creature can actually just carry him and move at regular speed.
Yeah, I think an
Ankheg could still do that. So
I think they can, but even if they can't, it's easily a rule you could do yourself. It's very straightforward.
They're just unencumbered while grappling.
Yeah,
Kind of
basically, that's all it is. Like,
Yeah, I like
Drop
that.
all that bread you stole.
never.
I keep it safe in a box.
Yeah, but there's. Sorry, that's stupid. That's just funny. Why'd you keep all the bread? But yeah, there's no reason for you because it mentions that they lay eggs and they have like broodlings and little children in the 5e book. There's no reason for you not to add the broodlings into your encounter with an Ankheg. So take that stat block, Dan. Maybe, as you said, put that up somewhere.
Yeah, I'll stick it up under the podcast.
Yeah, that'll be great. I'll love to use them as well. So for me at least, that's really it. It's a very small block. It's a very small stat block there. So
Yeah, that's all the stats. But let's get to part 3. Let's have our dessert, boys. We've
Yeah.
been
oh, Dan's taking the wheel off me.
no,
no,
I'm not
it's
taking
there,
the wheel.
it's there.
I'm not.
Wait,
the wheel analogy's over. I've gotten.
Who's driving then?
Technically, I was
God.
supposed to be curating since I introed, but I'm happy to let whoever drive, wants to drive.
I was just gonna say I'll get the dessert from the fridge because we've all been good, and now we can have our pudding.
No, it's full
yay.
it's full of bread. I got rid of it and just stiffed it with bread.
Yep, I'm looking in the fridge right now. It's nothing but bread.
All bread, all the time.
That's right.
We've already kind of talked we've definitely talked a fair bit about this. So,
Yeah.
so the
Oh, boy.
yeah. So all right. So first of all, just to go back to that point from earlier on the Dragon 117 article, Ecology of the Ankheg. So that goes into detail about their habits. And the 4th edition book does as well. So there's a couple of things just from those that I'll mention as ideas for how you might structure your Ankheg encounters or structure your Ankhegs as part of your world. In the 4th edition book, it specifies that Ankheg live as mating pairs. So at any given time, there are 2 adult Ankhegs, and, depending on the season or whatever, there are either Ankheg eggs or Ankheg broodlings, who then go off and find their own territory and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of I really love that setup, as the fact that there's like a mating pair of 2. So obviously, like, if you take examples from like our world, if like so the Ankheg is obviously an insect and therefore lays eggs, so the creatures grow externally. It like, so both parties, male and female, can search for food while the eggs are growing, assuming they don't need heat or whatever, but that's not clear. It's very much up to the DM. So you could have the classic idea of a far roaming Ankheg looking for food attacks a village, and the villagers or the players like deal with it and think the problem is solved, but there's a family 2 miles underground that you got rid of the Ankheg, you didn't kill the mother. There's
Mama's angry.
and that's I think that's a great feeling, because it's like, it's very organic that these creatures live in this way and that's how they live. And like it reward, like, because obviously what could happen is the players could do their research early on and you tell them all this, and then they actually like set themselves up to go hunt down the whole brood, and even that's friggin' super exciting, right? Like it's basically win-win.
Yeah, there's like no reason for an Ankheg, I guess, an Ankheg queen, like an Ankheg queen, to leave the hive. I guess it's pretty actually. That's a cool another stat block. An Ankheg queen, that'll be a cool one to make.
I know. I was thinking that as well. I was as we were starting the podcast, I was like, "Fuck! I didn't build an Ankheg queen." I was legitimately upset with myself for not doing it, because it was something that I meant to do. But I do have some thoughts on that, which we can get to.
As do I.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, then, the final point I wanted to make was in the ecology of the Ankheg. It talks about how the Ankheg go and they eat a lot, and when they're full, they basically hibernate. I think it's part of their egg laying process, or it's something. I can't remember. I'm sorry, I can't remember the details of the article, or the story, I suppose, is more accurate.
Fired.
Wow.
Wow. Okay.
But the reason that's important in the story is because basically the wizard explains to the villagers how, because the Ankheg is hibernating, they can effectively hunt it down and kill it while it's asleep.
Okay.
And so that's kind of interesting, this idea that, you could give that information to the players and they could, because in the story it kind of says, it's actually kind of funny because it's an AD&D story. I don't know if you guys know this, but in AD&D all the lords were just high-level fighters who were tired. It's just part of the world.
Okay.
Like the reason that the Baron of the land can't deal with this Ankheg problem is because he's off adventuring. which is just a wonderful little tidbit that I think is so cool.
You might encounter him on your travels.
Yeah, but the idea that because he's off with his friend, it literally says the Baron is off with his friends adventuring. So literally he's in the middle of a campaign, which is the reason he can't help his own village, which is it's just wonderful. It's just this it's very cool. But anyway, so obviously the problem is that you've got this kind of wizard who is suggested to be sort of more of a lore master than a master of the magic. He's kind of he's just an intelligent person who reads a lot and knows a few cantrips. So he doesn't think he could face the Ankheg, but he knows enough about the Ankheg to tell the villagers how to deal with it. So that's kind of cool. I like that idea of they have this pattern of they lay their eggs, their feed their broodlings go off and find their own territory, and then they feed very heavily for a short period of time, then they hibernate, they lay their eggs, and the cycle repeats. And a smart party or even people of the world, if they need to, can take advantage of that pattern and kill the Ankheg when it's vulnerable. But I've talked a lot, so Tim, talk about your queen. I'm sorry.
That is it is effective to kind of delve into the actual lore that is written for them. I didn't know that they had actually had a set idea for the Ankhegs. I thought they left it super general.
Well, it's worth remembering that this is Dragon Magazine 117 came out. Hang on, I'm going to check now. Yeah, it came out January 1987. So to clarify, that is 6 years before I was born.
6 years before all of us were born.
Basically, this is not hard canon. This is, this is 30-year-old canon that you can use. Which I actually, I legitimately think the story is well enough written that it's fun to read, and it's a little snippet into old D&D, but it's not canon in big inverted commas.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want with this is a bug, really. You can use whatever kind of insect that you want.
Well, for my idea with the queen, I was thinking that it would be, obviously there would be tunnels leading up to the queen, and you'd have to fight a couple of the Ankhegs. But I was thinking that the queen would probably have layer actions that she could basically activate. She would be in the middle of a large room. She probably wouldn't be particularly mobile because larger insect queens tend not to move virtually at all. So she would have this enormous kind of soft body that she would have to protect by calling on other Ankhegs, kind of stamping her feet. But she would also have a huge excess of acid, so her acid recharge would probably be 4 to 6, and she would probably have kind of a claw attack, or maybe kind of a more bludgeon than a slashing, because the queens would usually kind of grow bigger and then they wouldn't have use for digging claws, so they'd have a more of a kind of a punch or something like that. And there'd be pools of acid around the room, and maybe some way to climb up around the room, that there are other tunnels above the queen that Ankhegs will swarm out of, that you could climb up on top of and maybe deal some extra damage by jumping down onto the queen. So that's the kind of encounter that I would see happening around the queen, and she could activate all this other cool stuff, and you can have a good old time fighting this queen.
You got a boss fight there, for your Ankheg campaign. Yeah. Your Ankheg only campaign.
Yeah. Exclusively Ankheg. Players, Ankhegs.
Yeah, I like the image. I had this image in my head of Ankheg just picking you up with their mandibles and just tossing you into a pool of acid that's left around the Ankheg room. It's just...
Ooh, that's good.
You can
that's
do a lot
very,
of that.
very good.
Yeah. It's that kind of effective thing. Pools of acid are great because the players can utilize them to annoy each other, and they can like throw each other's items into them, and that could be some comic relief. Or they could just be thrown into them and start
My
dissolving.
cabbages.
No,
My cropes.
no, not my bread. All my bread. Yeah.
Yeah, you can just have that classic like James Bond esque like being like descended down into a pool of acid by like a rope or something. I don't know if these bugs would do that because they have no
I feel like
intelligence, but-
that. Yeah, I feel like you've associated an unusual intellect with these insects.
Yeah.
I'm just I'm just saying what's in my head, man. It's
Yeah.
it's what the show's all about, man. You gotta like.
I would imagine the queen might have a little bit more intelligence and might have the wherewithal to kind of bump you towards the acid because she's seen various other things that have been presented to her as food, like fall into it. And like if you wanted to write yourself a little bit of history to your character, you could like have the acid be filled with bones and stuff like that, kind of classic.
Yeah.
Well, it's worth saying that the acid that the Ankheg has is just its digestive acid. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not like. Well, I suppose it would be fair to say it's not separate. It's so it makes sense that they would try to feed things to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But having that very like otherworldly kind of, not because he's not really otherworldly, but having that kind of real almost like gross kind of feel to like the queen of like acid everywhere, just kind of being its like digestive fluids, just kind of like going everywhere. If you want to be real gross and stuff, kind of add some real like ew kind of factor to the fight.
It's all mucusy all over the place, and it's like
Yeah,
dripping
yeah.
from the roof. And like if you're standing in particular squares, maybe you'll get a dollop onto the top of your head, kind of thing.
Gross.
My head.
Yeah, and then maybe you could like tell your character that like they are now afraid of acid, or like if acid occurs later, like part of their character can be that they are very uncomfortable around acid because of this experience,
Or high
so that you
ceilings.
could
Yeah.
call back to previous experiences in your campaign.
And Ankegs.
And Ankegs. You must never
Yeah.
forget Ankegs.
Yep.
Or Ankegs.
Ankegs.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's an Ankeg queen.
Queen.
Did we talk about how to use this Ankegs in general in this
Uh,
part?
We talked about them. Well, I
bit.
talked about them as ecology and family and stuff like that.
Yeah. So
Do we want to talk about just
This
space
one-
Ankheg?
yeah, like this one that we have here in this book,
Yeah.
because that's what we do in the show. This one we have in this book. How will we use this guy in a fight against like our party members, our guys? We'll go against this guy.
Yeah. It would obviously be a pretty low level encounter.
Yeah. Even just seeing how it is, and maybe like two of them might be a good because they hang out in pairs.
Yeah.
Two of them might be a good fight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll have to be underground because they wouldn't really lead them too much. And it'll kind of just. I can't really. Can you guys have any interesting ideas for this? Because I'm completely blanking. Like all I'm thinking is he's grabbing you and they attack, and that's it.
See, yeah, the thing is, I have a lot of ideas for Ankegs, but not a lot of them about specifically how to fight one Ankheg. So
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that the Ankheg presented in the monster manual is quite a straightforward fight. It has two abilities. It can bite you, and if it does, it gets to grab you, and if it grabs you, it gets advantage to bite you some more. So like that's obviously a loop. Or it can just like spit acid. I think like given that it's kind of a high challenge rating single monster that's kind of, it feels kind of like maybe it could be a mini boss. I might say that a simple way to make it feel more bossy would be say that it can spray its acid in a cone, which would let it attack multiple enemies.
Yeah.
Because very rarely are players lined up in straight lines for you to like shoot through like tin cans. Like it's much more likely that like the ranger and the paladin are coming at the Ankheg at the same time, and so it sprays acid at both of them, and they recoil in fear.
Yeah.
I think what I'd like to do is I wouldn't. In terms of sort of setting up the encounter, I think I'd make it clear that these creatures like livestock is being snatched overnight.
Yeah.
The farmers don't know what's going on. If the players investigate the fields, they find these maybe holes or collapsed tunnels. And I think I'd let them trek underground for a while before having the Ankheg appear.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
if they don't want to do that, it could be suggested that they just kind of stake out the field If
Yeah,
they've
absolutely.
if the livestock has been disappearing on regular basis, like every night, they could just stake it out in the field and wait around until it appears.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had an idea for not exactly using the Ankheg in general, but like using him for other creatures, in a sense of he like they make tunnels and like a kind of like a network of tunnels underground. You can almost use it that Ankhegs are gone. There's a big network of tunnels. Some goblins moved in, or some like even more than that. It's like other creatures have moved in and made them a home. So you can use those tunnels as a dungeon for you, or you can even Ankheg could even still be in there, but like other creatures have moved in as well.
Yeah. Like I get you. Like the goblins have taken some of the tunnels, and the Ankhegs are hiding in other parts of it. That's very cool. I also like that because, like, obviously the Ankheg is, like, as we said, it has a single point of intelligence. It's not a smart creature. It's purely interested in food. So, like, if it attacks, say, a merchant caravan and pulls a wealthy merchant underground, there's treasure there for the taking, but, like, you have to go and find it. But, like, I like it as it's a very, like, natural explanation for why the party is finding wealth. Because this creature has no interest in wealth. It just wants to eat you.
Yeah.
Gonna eat you up.
Your armor is an inconvenience, not a thing of value.
Speaking of armor, actually, I don't know if there's too much interesting to say about this, but whenever I look up Ankheg, the first thing that comes up is Ankheg armor.
Yeah, have you looked into that, or will I describe it?
Well, I haven't actually looked into it. You might know a bit more than me, but it's from Baldur's Gate, and it's basically kind of it's an armor. It's from Baldur's Gate, the video game, I think, in this one.
Yeah.
And it's basically it can be armor that druids can wear. It can be heavy armor that druids can wear because like it's natural armor.
Yeah.
And also I think it doesn't say here, but like if I was playing it, maybe give it a little bit of acid resistance, just kind of make it a little bit more of an Ankheg stuff. But is there more on that? Is there?
No, that was all I was going to say. Yeah, that it's
cool.
That it's like it's kind of cool. It's like plate mail made out of Ankheg shell.
Nice.
So it describes how it can be in vibrant colors to be like appropriate with the like what's the other word, not armor, not shell, but chitin. Thank you. So you can have you can have this kind of quite vibrant or unusual plate mail, and like because obviously the rule even in 5th edition it's a rule which is amazing because 5th edition is generally kind of it's just a bit different. But even in 5th edition, there's a rule that druids cannot use metal weapons or armor.
Yeah.
So it's cool that like even now it's still a useful thing that like this creature is one of the kind of only ways for a druid to get their hands on something equating to plate mail because obviously you can't make plate without metal.
Yeah. So if you're gonna fight these guys, it'll be cool if your party members can just cut them up and like make it into armor. That's a cool idea. Making like monster armor is a really cool idea.
You love that because you love Monster Hunter.
yeah, I do. That's it.
So true. But it is such a cool thing, like scavenging otherwise you're just wasting these creatures. Like you just kill them and you're like, well, job done. Let's get our gold.
Well, you're not wasting them. You're protecting people a lot of the time. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I mean. Like you just kill the thing and then leave it there. I think it's much more flavorful and kind of worldly to say, okay, well, this thing has very sharp pincers. Maybe we can make some daggers or something out of it, or get vials of its juice,
of its acid. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that kind of stuff. The kind of scavenging off kind of nature, essentially.
Yeah. Anything else? He's a very. We have been going for a long time anyway. Just by looking at the time.
I was going to describe one more thing in particular.
All right.
If you guys have time for it.
Yeah. Of course.
Always. Yeah, apparently. So the Ankheg is obviously a burrowing creature. It feeds on creatures from above ground, and it has tremor sense, which made me think of the sandworms from Dune. Have you guys read Dune or watched the film? I haven't watched the film.
The spice must flow.
Yeah.
The film has Patrick Stewart in it.
I'll take your word for it.
I can't remember his character's name, but yeah. Planet Arrakis.
So
Go ahead, sorry.
so obviously Dune is a great, really fun book. If you haven't read it, I'd say I'd recommend it. But one of the parts of the world is that it's this massive desert planet, and the sort of most of the landscape is dominated by these huge rolling deserts that are. And the apex predator of this is called the sandworm, and it's effectively this creature that lives underground. And it's got very sensitive hearing, or a similar kind of thing to tremor sense, where it can detect footsteps, and it uses that to go and feed on whatever is walking. So the people of this world have mastered a way of walking, and they call it, I think, move without rhythm.
Yeah.
It's kind of a philosophy where they walk in a rhythmic pattern so that they can't be detected by this beast. So I started thinking about, like, that would be an interesting way to explore the Ankheg. So what I'd probably do to put the Ankheg in that kind of setting is I'd swap their 2 speeds. So they're much slower at walking, but they're much faster at burrowing. And they effectively, rather than digging through dirt, they dig through sand. And they maybe have an extended tremor sense, but no dark vision. So they basically hunt creatures that they can hear above them, would be the idea. If you imagine kind of this, huge desert, and these Ankheg, and so the people who live here either have means of traveling that don't have footsteps or patterns, or they walk without rhythm.
Yeah, that's a cool thing to do.
And there was another point I was going to make too, which is then I started thinking about how they were big creatures that lived underground.
Yeah.
And as some people might know, there's another creature in D&D, another big creature that lives underground, called the bullet, or the land shark.
Yes.
The land shark is not large, but huge. And it's described as basically eating whatever it wants. It's the apex predator of wherever it lives, because it's gigantic, its armor makes it effectively impervious, and it has a huge mouth. So I started thinking about how interesting it would be to make a place in the world that not only had Ankhegs, but had bullets feeding on the Ankhegs. So this idea of an ecology where, and maybe you could combine that with the desert setting. Maybe you have a desert where the people travel lightly and move often because the Ankhegs are after them, and the bullets are after the Ankhegs. And if the bullets show up, then they're after you too.
Dan, that's a really cool idea. I don't want to be the contrary, but it's also a large creature according to 5e.
Oh, is it?
I'm looking at it now.
Oh,
yeah.
Large monstrosity.
But there's no reason for you to not make it huge.
That's so surprising, because the art is so much bigger.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that in 5th edition, the purple worm, which is a gargantuan monstrosity with a burrow speed of 30 feet, I'm pretty sure that is inspired by
The sandworm.
the sandworm of Dune.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is another desert-dwelling, scary thing, which we can all look forward to reviewing in future episodes of Creature Club.
Subscribe today, please. Thank you.
Subscribe and keep listening for, I don't know how many episodes it's going to take to get the purple worm. A lot.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. We'll get to the bullet, I guess, when we get there.
Yeah, relatively soon, even.
Yeah.
But that's it. Just some more ecological suggestions for your setting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff, guys.
That was an episode. Yeah, I did not think we would go for that long on this guy, because it's one page, it's a small stat block, and we rambled on, as we do, about monsters.
It's an indication of either we're getting better at reading into it and exploring its nooks and crannies, or we're getting worse at managing our time.
Yeah. I don't know.
I blame Tim.
You decide.
Well, thank you all very much for tuning in this week. Tuning in those radio dials of yours that you tune in to listen to podcasts with. I have been Tim Porter.
I have been Mikey DC.
And I've been Daniel White. If
Thank you
you've
all very
enjoyed this episode, we have an iTunes now, which you can subscribe to. I know some people use iTunes.
I was just going to say, with iTunes, if you can, it'll be great if you can leave us a review.
Oh, yes.
That actually really helps us getting a review from you guys. It would be good if it was positive, but if it wasn't, then whatever. Cool.
Just
that's fine.
It's important to be honest.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, and stay cool.
Thanks for listening.
Cool.